Okay, so this is Gabriel Castaña, staff writer for The Gamer, sitting down to have an interview with the game directors of Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Will there be returning characters? Will the light prevail against darkness? Will our comic book and graphic novel knowledge of Dragon Age finally come into play? Are some of the questions being asked? Let's take a look at this exclusive interview with the directors of Dragon Age: The Veilguard.
Hey guys, my name's Gabrielle Castano with The Gamer, and I am here with
John Epler, creative director for Dragon Age: The Veilguard.
Ashley Barlow, creative performance director for Dragon Age: The Veilguard.
Nice.
and we are here to ask them some questions at San Diego Comic-Con about the game that is coming out soon.
Can't
I
wait.
have a mix of questions from my colleagues and stuff. We have a bunch of big fans on our staff. It's obviously been some time since the last Dragon Age title, so how have you guys gone about refreshing your memories for the next game? Is this a return to the series roots, or are you trying something fresh, or is it a mix of both?
I think every Dragon Age game has always been a mix of both. So, I mean, Dragon Age 2, Dragon Age Inquisition, it's both taking what's come before and being respectful and making sure to pay honor to, but also doing something new at the same time. So each
The
one's had
franchise
its
has
own cast of
always
characters.
evolved.
Obviously, each one's had a different protagonist. But yeah, I'd say a mix of both is pretty much where we're at.
Also, I would say that the one thing I've always appreciated about the Dragon Age franchise is that it always evolves the combat style slightly, and I know that's a sticky point for some people because some people want to remain stuck in the Dragon Age Origins phase. I much prefer the evolution. The combat in the new game looks absolutely phenomenal, like a blending of Mass Effect and what we've classically seen from Dragon Age. So it looks really cool. Again, taking elements of what we've seen before and blending it into something new, just like they're doing with the
Totally. We took
story.
like the inspiration of the great storytelling that bioware is already doing, and they just elevated and we iterated on it, and it feels very fresh.
Awesome. So how did you guys decide on the change in name from Dreadwolf to Veilguard?
I mean, as we were building the game, obviously this is still a lot of Solus is a big part of the story of Dragon Age: Veilguard, but as we were building the game, as we were building the story, we realized that the story really was about the companions, the people that you bring along with you to stop the end of the world. And so rather than
I think
have
they
a
answered
title that
this in a different
focuses on
video
one
because I already
antagonist
remember
and
this
makes them the
answer in a
centerpiece of the
different
story, we
way.
wanted to go with a title that really emphasized that, that the Veilguard, that group of people you bring together to stop the end of the world.
So, what have been some of the biggest changes implemented in the upcoming title that differentiate the gameplay from different games in the series? And was
Combat.
there anything that you wanted to do in that regard with this game but weren't able to?
So I mean, I think every Dragon Age game has been very different in terms of how it approaches combat and gameplay. I think for us, the biggest thing we wanted to bring in was really the concept of creating these fantastic builds, these using abilities, choosing skills that really build the strategic layer on top of the moment-to-moment gameplay. I think it's very deep and involved customization system. This skill tree we've shown a little bit of a preview of it. We'll show more over time, but it really allows you to just pick and choose how you want to build these characters, how you want to make them work together in ways that allow for really interesting strategic combinations, strategic tactics on the battlefield. So
I don't know if he's going to talk about it specifically here, but in the other video we watched, which was the one Game Informer did, I think, which was the like the making of the game, and they talked about all the different combos that can happen and how you can spec your companions to like give you access to combos based upon the way that you spec your companions. So we might, there might be six people who have the same characters in their party, but they have those characters spec'd in such a different way that you're going to see different combos happening between the characters on screen. I think that's a pretty unique way to do things, as opposed to everybody just having sort of like going back to Dragon Age Origins, everyone had a very fixed. Like you had the old lady Win, she was a healer. Like that was her role, was as the healer, and as an example, but having ways that these characters can be specialized out to counter whatever you decide to play with, whether you're doing a mage or an archer or a tank. That's pretty cool in my mind.
It's different because it's so many new characters. I mean, we have some sneaky surprises of returning loved characters, but that's the big
Morrigan!
thing. I mean, we have 700 new unique characters to talk to. And again,
Claudia
not
Black
the
is
biggest
back.
game.
I'm sold.
It's a big yeah.
Okay, so do you guys have a favorite region of the world that you've liked best or that you're most excited for fans to experience?
I really like Well, I love Minrathous.
I mean, I love Minrathous as well, but instead of going with the same answer as Ashley, we go something different. I really love Ravane. It's, that more tropical feel. Something we've never really been able to do before in Dragon Age is what does the coast of Ravane look like? Obviously, there's also Treviso and Antibes. There's so many awesome areas in this game that it's really hard to pick one because there's been so much love poured into how these areas look, and they all feel and look different, but also coherent and consistent with the style of the game as a whole. And I mean, that's always the hardest part. You build a world with a bunch of different spaces, making sure they feel like they belong together is challenging, and our team has knocked out of the park.
A question from my colleague. A lot of the marketing so far has seemed fairly jovial for a pretty dark series, but from the trailer, it looks like things are gonna get dark. So how do you guys go about balancing the lightness with the dark in this game?
Oh man, the writers did such a good job of adding, like, finding the light in the darkness of this story, and it's not without humor. You totally
Well, I mean,
have to
BioWare's
have it.
done a good
I
job
think
of
the
that
cast
over the
brought
years
it out
with all of
nicely,
the games
and
they've
it's
created.
not something that we need to shy away from. I think it balances it out.
And I mean, I think the mix of light and dark has always been a part of Dragon Age. As far back as Origins, you had Alistair, obviously, wisecracking from the beginning.
Morrigan
In
as well.
DA2, you had some lighter, funnier moments. In DAI, you had the card game of Wicked Grace with your companions. But I think it's that contrast. The dark moments don't land as well if everything is dark, everything is grim. But when you counterbalance them, I mean, I'll use DA2 as an example, where you had the storyline with Hawk's mother counterbalanced with, some slightly quippier, lighter companions like Isabella and Varric.
Isabella was great.
And that moment hit
Pirate
hard
Queen.
because there was that contrast.
Exactly.
Haven't played
if
that game in a
everything's
long
dark, then
time.
it's kind of just depressing.
We need to bring you down.
Yeah. So for both of you, what was your favorite character design from the game, and what about them makes you choose them as your top pick?
Nev.
Come on. There is no picking favorites because they're all so good. I mean, you spend enough time with any of them, you're going to fall in love with them and then hate them at times, and fall in love with them and hate them at times. So I wish I could give you a favorite, but how about you guys choose? You get in and you tell us your favorite. I would find that more interesting.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, I love all the characters. I would say one of the more interesting character designs to me has always been Amrik Volkaren, the Necromancer. Just the way that they created this character is a little bit older, but also, kind of in the more classical Hollywood actor type with and I found the way that they built him to be that character super fascinating. And also, again, clearly, as we've seen in the fan base, they landed that, attractive older man. So I'm really excited for fans. But I mean, honestly, they're all fantastic, and I can't wait for people to meet all of them.
Is there a particular companion that you're excited to see return, and if so, who is it and why?
We're going to leave that to people to play the game. Obviously, there's Scout Harding who's back, we've already announced, but other characters coming back, I think it's just going to be, I'm excited for people to see them, and especially see them in the context of having 10 years have passed since the last Dragon Age, both in the real world, but
Yeah,
also
Varric
in the
looks
world of
amazing
Beta,
for
so.
10
We have
years
to
having
let them
passed,
do
with
their
like the
own
rugged
intros,
beard and the
'cause,
longer hair.
that's the good part.
I like how everybody in the trailer had like a little information, like a little name. Like, that's cool. I like that. Yeah. Is there any sort of canon path in the game that fans can consider the true one, or is it truly up to player choice?
That's a great question.
We get asked that a lot, especially because when we start doing ancillary products like comics, shows, people want to know what's canon. We have to decide one that is for that media canon, but I don't think there really is a canon state of the world. I do think there are some more interesting ones. I'm always a fan of the most chaotic and most strange paths through the game, but no, there's no canon. There's always what your world of Thetis is, what your people have done is it's your own canon. Canon is a very personal thing in Dragon Age.
Yeah, and it should be. That's what we wanted, right? Like,
I think the only time I've ever seen them make a stand is like with Mass Effect 3. There sort of is a canon ending. And I've heard that for the next Mass Effect, not what they're calling Mass Effect 4 because they're kind of choosing to skip Andromeda. I've heard that because they had to pick one of the endings from 3 as like the canon ending, and that's a case of coming back to a storyline 15 years later or whatever and saying, well, we have to pick one because there were multiple endings, which is the one that we would pick as like the default state. Also, games like Pillars of Eternity, Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, you have to have sort of a canon ending for the players who are coming into the second game who didn't play the first game. And because it's a game where it imports your character save, or it can import your character save from the previous game, there have to be like default canon decisions for the players who never played, so they can come in, and when they're going through the character creation process, the game stops and says, okay, you're just, this is like the canon ending. And having just played Dragon Age Inquisition, I've been playing that on the Xbox. I can tell you too that because I didn't have a previous save game file from everything else left over, when I started Dragon Age Inquisition, it does have a default setting that takes all of the like core moments and has those like as a default save state. So it's interesting to hear them say that they don't have an official canon in terms of we're never going to say this is the official canon, but in terms of like the character creation process and starting your character from fresh, they do sort of have an idea of these things happen in this order to get to the beginning of this game, if that makes sense. It might not make sense. Hopefully it does.
Choose your own path, choose your own adventure, and choose your own consequences. So I'm excited to see what people do.
Awesome. Kind of going off of that, how did the different choices that you make impact the gameplay down the line? If it's something that you can share, if there's something that you block yourself out of, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get too deep into details because I think one of the most interesting parts of choice and consequences is when those consequences are surprising and unexpected. But each choice, especially the major choices in the game, have significant consequences on gameplay, what content is available to you, but also how characters in the world regard you. No choice, no choice should be easy, and we never want to make players feel like there's a right choice. So there's always going to be a consequence, and especially, like I said, some that you don't expect and some that change the world in real ways.
Yeah, leave it to their will.
Part of that is being able to customize the character is a really cool touch in this game. So what were some of the challenges in doing this, and how deep will the customization of the player character actually run?
I mean, yeah, it's our character creator. I mean, we've done a lot of work to make sure that it allows players to really be who they want to be. It's one of our core pillars of Dragon Age. Always has been, as far back as Dragon Age Origins. In this case, we were able to, leverage new technology, leverage new techniques to really take that customization even further. So, I mean, obviously, we've talked about the character creator a little bit, the choices you make in the game, which faction you belong to, things like that affect your journey through Thetis and through the story of the Veilguard.
Ashley, what was the biggest casting decision for the game that you're most excited for fans to see, and how did you choose this person for that character?
I think the biggest casting decision for this game, that's a big statement.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, one of them.
Yeah, fair.
One of them, and
If they say Matt Mercer, I'm
it's
just
a
going to be like, come on.
collaboration casting, right?
Like, there's so many
and
other
the
great
ensemble
talents here.
that the companions create was basically where we started. And I've said this before. We put the character
Bringing
out on the
Varric
wall.
back is a big deal.
We saw
And
the
Hardy.
writing. We auditioned vastly, and we assured that the cast was very dynamic and complimenting and opposing
Right.
to each other. So we spent a lot of time in getting those companions the juiciest they could possibly be.
Are there any plot threads established from the novels or the graphics that have made their way into the new game? And if so, can you share what those are?
I mean, plot threads, one of the things we do try to make sure with the games is that you don't need to have consumed all the ancillary content to understand what's going on. But obviously, I can go into a little bit. There's characters from the comics, especially the most recent one, that show up in the game. So one pair of characters we've talked about before, Evka and Antoine.
This is really cool, though. This is what I would consider to be Easter eggs because this is a good example. I might even be able to give a better example of this is for those people who watched the Halo show that Paramount Plus did, which unfortunately just got canceled after second season. I was very sad to hear that because I was one of the people who actually really loved that iteration. But that's a perfect example of a franchise, of an intellectual property that has bridged the gap and exists in video game, it exists in television, it exists in novel format, comic format, all this different stuff. And there always has to be one that's like the main, and many people consider like the Halo games to be the default like state of the universe, and then all the other things, the YouTube series, the comic books, the TV show, the novels are all sort of supplementary to what's actually going on. So when you see characters from those comics and books, everything show up in the games, it's like an Easter egg. And that kind of feels like what they're doing here, where it's like the games are the main popularity point for Dragon Age as a franchise. I'll be the first to admit I've never read any of the Dragon Age novels. I've never read any of the Dragon Age comics. I probably never will. But I love the games. And so I'm not going to have any clue who these characters are when they show up in the comics in the games. But the people who do get the benefit of that being like a massive Easter egg, which is always cool to see that happen. For me, it would be like stuff from Star Wars Extended Universe, aka Legends. Like if Mara Jade was to ever show up as an official canon character, it'd be like, oh my god. But like when they took they've taken like the headhunter ship and made that canon in the shows, and also having different characters show up from the Legends universe. I'm at least familiar with it there, even though I'm not familiar with it here in Dragon Age. But it does work in terms of giving Easter eggs to the fans. So that's never a bad thing because Thrawn rocks, and I'm sure that somebody out there is going to have their favorite characters from the comics and books, etc., that show up in the games. Bubble says, "I love the setting name Thetis. Thetis, it just works. I do like that
On
name."
two of the Grey Wardens. There's a but that in general, we just love to make sure that those characters have there's that continuity. So even if you so if you don't read the comics, don't read the books, you still know what's going on. But if you do, it gives you that extra level of texture. And honestly, the same is true even for the previous games. It's one thing where we want to make sure that if you play the previous games, you get that, those references, you get that extra context, that extra texture. But also we want to allow players who don't necessarily consume all that ancillary media to really get into the story of the game and understand what's going on. So
My colleague said that there's going to be roughly 140,000 lines of dialogue in the game. How did you guys go about casting and recording such a gargantuan task?
There's some good. There's a world out there. There's a world in there. That's what it takes time. This talent was casted throughout 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And it's like driving across countries with them. The amount we spend in the booths, and they put their heart and souls into it. And you just we have such a great team. The performance team, the EA talent team. All of our executives, our leaderships that speak into the casting, and we.
By the way, this is something that actually came up. I actually Googled this the other day and I couldn't find any information on this. But in regards to Starfield, which has 252,000 plus lines of spoken dialogue, this has 140,000-ish. I was trying to find out if somebody had ever put together like the total amount of time spent on spoken dialogue in Starfield, because I was genuinely pleased to see that the company behind Kingdom Come Deliverance, as they are preparing for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, just put out a video on their YouTube channel that takes every single cutscene from the first game. It's not all the spoken dialogue, but it's all the cutscenes from the game and compiled it into this supercut that's like 5.5, 6 hours long. And they just threw it up on their YouTube channel as a way for players who have never played the game before to watch this mini series if they wanted to, split up into, it's one huge mega cut, but you could split that up into however many episodes you want to get up to speed with the story before you go play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And that got me thinking about how many hours worth of lines of spoken dialogue are there in Starfield. I couldn't find an answer to that, but it would be interesting to know, because they talk about 140,000 plus or whatever here. How much does that equate to in terms of hours of spoken dialogue? Because it's not indicative of how long the game is, but for someone who thinks about stuff like that, it's interesting to have that sort of data just to look at as a point of entry and say, oh, okay, so it's got 17 hours of spoken dialogue. That's a big deal, because like if I go on when I go on a photo shoot, I'm on a press tour, let's say I shoot 750 photos a day, and then I record 6 hours of raw footage every single day. That gives me a pretty good idea when I can break it down into the day by day and come back after a week and say, I've got 250 gigs of raw footage here, and I've got 15,000 photos. You kind of know what you're working with at that point and can say, okay, this is going to be this big at the end of the day. It's not a big deal, but it's sort of an interesting talking point.
We got that, like I said, it's over 700 characters that you get to speak to. You're going to meet somebody you like and someone you don't like. Yeah, and everybody just worked relentlessly and tirelessly to record, and if needed, go back and re-record, because a lot of this recording happens one person at a time. Some of our talent are meeting for the first time.
Wow, that's why.
This weekend.
And then just a last question that we usually ask in interviews. Is there anything else that you guys would like to share that you think our readers should know about the project?
Honestly, we've talked a lot about everything a lot of the things I'm excited about. I think just generally, I'm really excited for players to play this game, see the characters, see the returning favorites, see how they all connect together into this, what I feel is a very fully realized world and a story with, again, a lot of consequentiality and a lot of characters that just have these exciting and interesting storylines.
Yeah, I think you said it. I'm just excited that it's going to get in players' hands and they can celebrate. I know they're excited too.
Oh, I'm super excited.
I've seen them. So
I'm
please
gonna be playing
enjoy
the
it and
shit
play
out
it
of
to
this
its
game.
fullest and enjoy the worlds and the characters we've created.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time. Looking forward to the game. Thank you.
Pleasure.
I am also looking forward to the game. It's going to be a lot of fun. Dragon Age: The Veilguard, still no launch date. We have gotten confirmation that it's confirmed for Steam Deck. It's not going to require the EA app, which has a lot of people questioning what's going to happen with the what's it called, the Rook or the Castle or whatever it's called, where your cloud saves are. Um, I can't answer that question.